Welcome to Literally Books, the podcast. I'm Lindsay.
My name is Magda.
And today we are going to be going deep into Deep End by Ali Hazelwood. Just a quick disclaimer for this episode. We are going to be treating a lot of inappropriate topics for younger audiences, as well as a quick trigger warning for BDSM and various conversations around sexuality. So go ahead and skip this one if that one is not for you. For the rest of you heathens,
welcome.
We'll take it nice and slow.
Yes, it's going to be a fun conversation. But before we go into Deep End, what have you been reading?
Okay, what have I been reading? I've been reading A Gathering of Shadows, which is the sequel to A Darker Shade of Magic by V.E. Schwab.
How's it going? Is it still holding up?
It's okay.
Yeah, okay.
It's like it's calm, it's cool. It's like not my favorite. I'm not like obsessed with it, but it's okay.
It's good. Okay.
And then I am almost done with Mickey 7.
It's a quick read, right?
Yeah, I started at like 10 p.m. the night before last and was 30% into it on the first day. I'm now 75% into it. I'm going to finish it today. It goes down like a warm glass of milk. I love it.
It is so good. And I could not put that book down either. I'm actually about to start reading the second book on that series,
which like is Antimatter
Blues or something like that. And I can't wait. And he also has a new book coming out pretty soon. And I'm just obsessed with his style of writing. It's just very easy. And I love the storytelling.
By who you mean Edward Ashton?
Yes,
our new bestie.
Our new bestie. Shout out to Edward Ashton. I'm so glad you enjoyed the book.
It's great. What are you reading?
Okay, so I just finished another woo-woo witchy books. You know, I'm like really into that whole vibe now. So I finished reading Weyward by Emilia Hart, and not the pilot, the writer. Hey, no, but it was really good. It deals a lot with
Wait, were you thinking of Amelia Earhart?
Oh yeah.
Sorry, I was like, who's the pilot? Okay, yeah, please keep going.
Oh, I'm an idiot, guys. But anyways, Weyward by Emilia Hart, and it was a really cozy, nice read. It deals with like 3 generations of wayward women in 3 different timelines, as obvious, as I normally love to read. And it's just a very powerful storytelling about women supporting women and how a little bit of witchy vibes come into the book and kind of help the women thrive. And it was just a cozy, nice read. So if you're into those vibes, I think you will really enjoy this book. I think you have read this before.
Yes, but I think when we were talking about it, I said, I know I read that book. I have literally no memory of the plot. And then I went back and I'd rated it 4 stars. So I agree with Magda. I just couldn't tell you what it's about.
It is one of those. I don't think it was like super memorable, but it was just like a nice, cozy read. Mm-hmm. I think if you enjoyed this, I definitely recommend The Lost Bookshop because it has very similar vibes. And that story really like stayed with me. It was really beautiful. And then the other one that I'm back to my rom-com vibes, guys. And I absolutely love this book. It was called Honestly, I'm Totally Faking It by Amanda Gambill. This was a recommendation in one of the romance book subreddits. And I love it. I cannot stop thinking about it. If you're looking into a fake dating trope with a little bit of politics and an assistant that is just putting his life upside down, this one is for you. It was funny. It was such a fun story. And I read it in like 2 days. Oh, chef's kiss. I think this might be my favorite book that I've read this year so far.
Wow.
Maybe.
Okay.
It's kind of rivaling it with the Frozen River, I think. It's like really up there. It was so good. Loved it. But that's it. So maybe let's take a little break and then we'll be right back with some book news. Welcome back, everybody. So now we're going to get into some book news and Lindsay's going to get us started.
Okay, we're actually going to have a couple of book news. We're going to have a couple of themes in our book news this week. And the first one is one that Magda and I talk about a lot that really breaks my heart. And it's generally about book bans and legislation that's being introduced about book bans around the United States right now. So Texas had a number of new bills pre-filed in Texas that further criminalize distribution of what they deem harmful or banned books. So Lainey Hawes, who's a co-founder of the Texas Freedom to Read Project, wrote in an article by Odyssey, AUDACY.com, if you want to go look it up. She said one bill would criminalize almost anyone who allows a child to have access to material that they deem to be harmful to minors. They are rewriting what harmful to minors means. They are opening up criminal liability to just about anyone. This could mean that if you want to put a little free library in your front yard, if you put the color purple or the kite runner, and if a child gets it, you could be charged with a crime.
What the fuck? Mm-hmm. I guess it hasn't passed yet, but it has been introduced, and the way that we're going, it's not great.
Well, and the thing I think they're trying to call out about it is Actually, let me talk about my second news story, and then we'll talk about why I think this is super harmful. Okay, so the next story is, and then we'll talk about all of these together, I think, is various publishers and the Authors Guild file a lawsuit against the state of Idaho. And this is in reaction to HB 710, which was enacted last July, and it forbids anyone under the age of 18 from accessing books deemed as harmful to minors, including those depicting sexual conduct. And this rule applies in schools and in public libraries. And the members of the lawsuit, who include Penguin Random House, Hatchet Group, HarperCollins, Macmillan, Simon & Schuster, and various other Authors Guild authors, basically say that the definition of harmful to minors is far too broad, and something that currently qualifies as harmful to minors are books like The Handmaid's Tale, Toni Morrison's The Bluest Eye. The lawyer, Michael Griegel, an adjunct faculty member with Cornell Law, says this type of self-censorship is inimical to First Amendment liberties, and so that's the sort of basis of the lawsuit.
This just breaks my heart. And like, yeah, I feel like it's just going to continue to happen. It feels like we are just readers everywhere, just under attack, just because we want to entertain ourselves, maybe learn a little bit. And yeah, I agree with what the lawsuit was saying. Like, it's the freedom of speech and our freedom of reading is just fully under attack at this point. And it's just so sad.
So the reason that I want to talk about these together, why I stopped us earlier when we talked about the Texas one, which is our home state, but these laws exist in Florida, in Iowa, and Idaho. Here, various other states are doing this, but they're very insidious because they use language that is intentionally extremely vague. That harmful to minors rhetoric that I brought up in both stories, it's like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
And like oftentimes things that are good life lessons involve something that is potentially harmful, right? Like a death in the family is harmful to you. Getting punished for doing something bad is harmful. So like, it's very strange because the stories that I think have the most power and the most ability to teach are ones that could potentially fall under this definition.
I am just really happy for like the activists that are out there that are continuing to fight the good battle and then trying to rebuke all of these attacks for us to read. Because yeah, like I think that's the point, is to kind of make these broad statements that are just going to make it easy to pick and choose who are they going to be persecuting in the future, right? So I'm just really thankful that there's people out there that are trying to do the right thing and continuing to fight this to potentially protect our right to read and to educate people, which is sad that we're in this state.
Yeah, there was a movie that came out called The Librarians at Sundance recently, and it's basically about a lot of these laws and how public servants like librarians are basically becoming like arbiters of what is appropriate content because they don't want to be charged with a crime for accidentally doling out content that is illegal under these extremely vague and difficult to parse laws. And so like in a weird way, they're becoming these social justice warriors for just performing like what I would consider like pretty inane acts of like providing literature to children. It's fascinating. And it sucks at the same time. I don't know.
I think this kind of goes back to something that you said in one of our previous episodes. Being a librarian should not be an edgy job. This is not an edgy job. And like, I mean, that just kind of stuck with me because it's true. Like librarians are not there to like be just, I don't know, like the rock star. I mean, they are my rock stars,
yeah,
I guess.
Rock stars,
but they're not just there to like be doing like dealing illegal books. I mean, maybe they are, I don't know, but like that's not what the whole purpose is, and it just makes me, it's infuriating. I have a lot more thoughts on this, but I think if I say them out loud, I will just get banned.
I want you to say them. Say them.
No, because I would just be
name them. That's a Real Housewives joke. No, I'm with you though. Like I wanted to devote a little extra time in the book news to this right now because I think like people often say like, oh, well, books shouldn't be political. Books shouldn't be. And it's like books are inherently political. Mm-hmm. Everything about them is political. And I feel like access to ideas should be a default, and it's becoming increasingly not the default. And that should really scare people, regardless of what your ideals are. Like, what if at some point someone occupies a position where they're deeming these as harmful and they include your ideals? Then what are you going to do?
Yep. I would totally recommend for people to go read Fahrenheit 451 if you haven't. I think it's a banned book, but you can still go get it. I don't think you can get it from some public libraries or some things, but if you can find it, please go read it. It is I think it's very adequate for the times that we're in.
1000%. And remind yourselves, like, a rising tide lifts all boats. Having people be more educated, having them dig into ideas that agree or disagree with you, that ultimately helps us all. It means that we're more informed, more thoughtful, more empathetic, more understanding, more aware. Those are all good things.
Yeah, I totally agree, Lindsay. And I think what better note to end book news with. But I think
and with that very classy note, let's go talk about some deep thrust sex and BDSM because we are a women who can do both.
Yes. All right. We'll be right back.
Welcome back. We are going to be going deep into Ali Hazelwood's Deep End, or as we will forever call it, Whet.
That is the real name.
It is the real name.
Yeah, you can tell me otherwise. All right, so a quick summary. We're gonna go ahead and just give you guys a warning. If you have not read this book, we totally recommend you to read it and then come back to this book later because we are gonna be giving quite a bit of spoilers. All right, let's go ahead and get started. After a traumatic diving accident, Stanford athlete Scarlett, our main female character, is determined to regain her confidence and return to her specialty dives, all while balancing her dream of becoming a doctor.
Penelope, or Pen, Scarlett's teammate and the diving team captain, starts questioning her long-term relationship with Lukas, our male main character, who is an Olympic swimmer. When they break up, Pen publicly suggests that Lukas and Scarlett should date since they share the same sexual interests.
Forced into each other's orbit, Scarlett and Lukas embark into a physical relationship exploring BDSM dynamics, which unexpectedly deepens into something more, where they both have to overcome their traumas and accept each other for who they really are.
When Pen's rebound relationship ends, a messy love triangle forms, forcing Scarlett, Lukas, and Pen to confront their true feelings while striving to achieve their athletic and personal goals. Let's start with high-level reactions to this book, because you have read basically every Ali Hazelwood book. I've read quite a few. How does this fit for you?
I really enjoyed it, honestly. I think I'll be totally honest. I think Not in Love was not really for me, and I was a little nervous going into this one, but I enjoyed it way more than I did. I think we're going to be talking about this. There's going to be quite a bit of relationships that happen into this book that I really want to talk about a little bit more. It does deal with some heavy BDSM content, but I think it's done really well, and I can't wait for us to kind of chat about this. I understand that this book is not for everyone. I think Ali did put a warning in her books, and it does tell you exactly what you're about to get into it. So if this is a topic that you don't think you're going to enjoy, don't read it. But I think if you do kind of like this type of dynamic, I think it's a very enjoyable book.
Well, and to be fair to the book too, it doesn't really go that deep into some of the BDSM stuff. Like there are explicit sexual scenes in it, but it's not... You're not going to come away scarred from it. If you've had sex, you're going to feel like it's a familiar experience for you. So
exactly right.
Yeah.
Like I feel like I don't practice BDSM, but I'm like, oh, okay, I can kind of relate to some of this stuff. So I cannot wait. Sorry. But yeah, no, I enjoyed it. I think it was a really fun read. I went through it really quickly, and it was just fun. Yeah. What about you?
So it's funny because you and I both love Ali Hazelwood, but I actually think in many ways we sit on the opposite spectrums of which books that we like and what we like about our books. Because I personally loved Not in Love. And there were things about the main character in this book that are why I don't attach to some of her other books. But the themes, the way that she writes the interpersonal relationships and her male main characters are good.
Love me some Lukas. Good job.
So yeah, I feel the takeaway is like, it's our job to be like sort of thoughtful about these and like, you know, dig into things that we think worked and didn't work. But overall, like, it's a great book. Ali's a great writer. I don't like romance overall. And I feel like she was the person that you introduced me to that I was like, I'm probably wrong about romance. I actually really love this.
Yeah, she just has a way of telling stories. And I really appreciate that her main female characters too are very accomplished in everything, which is something that I really appreciate. And it's not like I don't know, like a lot of, I'm not kind of taking hitting on this job, but like, you know, they're always like marketing girls or boss girls, and these are like, I really
STEM
like
women.
Yeah, these are STEM women that are like wanting to pursue the sciences, and I really love that take because we don't get to see that too much outside of Ali Hazelwood books.
Like, you don't often hear about like a woman being thrust into to the hilt and then the next sentence being about like her building a neural network for you know, like biology research. It's a nice pairing. It's a nice rounded character.
I really love that. And you know, like, I think for somebody that it's, if you're kind of starting to kind of get into reading and books, a lot of the romance books that I read when I was growing up, they were a little too one-dimensional. And I think this kind of adds a little bit extra depth to the characters, and I really appreciate that.
Okay, so to get into some of that depth, let's start with, we're going to talk a little bit thematically about this book. I think the thing that stuck out to us both are, and that's a central theme, are the relationships between the female characters in the book and female friendships and female relationships. What were some things that stuck out to you in that theme?
I think my absolute favorite relationship in this was a relationship between Barbara and Scarlett. And Barbara is her stepmother. And you can kind of see that Scarlett still refers to her as a stepmother, but their bond between them is so deep. Scarlett's father was a very abusive man, especially like a verbal abuse, and he did a lot of crazy things that just escalated over time. And Barbara what she did, she just kind of took both of them out of that situation, and she fought for, what is it called? The visitation rights?
Custodial rights.
She fought for custodial rights, and she was able to get him in order to protect Scarlett. So you can kind of see that Scarlett was never left alone, and she had somebody that was always looking out for her, even though it wasn't her biological mother. I really love that deep relationship and understanding that they each had. And it was kind of great to see that both of them had this thing that they kind of knew each other so well. They gave each other space, but they were always kind of, when they got together, they just knew exactly who they were. And one of my absolute favorite things was one of the conversations that they had between them where they were talking about like Scarlett's future and potentially having kids in the future. And Barbara was like, yeah, I cannot wait to be like a step grandmother. And and Scarlett's like, you're not going to be that. You're going to be the grandmother. Like, that's who you are. And that just really hit me. And I thought it was a really beautiful way of portraying found families.
I completely agree. I think it reminded me a little bit of the relationship in Queen's Gambit, although a lot more functional, between the last stepmother and the main character of that show, where they call out at some point that in some ways Barb is like an absent mother because she's like a surgeon of some kind. And so she's really challenging the definition of what we look at as a maternal figure. She's very busy. She's not like packing lunches, but she's there. She's consistently there. She's protecting Scarlett. She's encouraging her, just maybe not in the ways that we want to like see a mother figure.
Yep.
But I think I also love that relationship. I also think it's a very interesting way to see the ways in which Scarlett internalizes her ability to open herself up to other people, because Barb is the most stable relationship that she's had in her life, and she still can't call her mom.
It's interesting. Yeah.
And she's like, she won't make herself vulnerable to do that in that way, but she can when it's somebody else's, like when it's a potential child's relationship with her. I thought that moment was really beautiful of her being like, look, therapy is working. I like want to tell you how important you are to me. Yeah.
Well, and we do kind of learn the reason why she didn't call her mom. Like, I think she did at one point, but her abusive dad would like put a stop to it. Like, he was like, no, you're not gonna do it. And she just immediately internalized that and was like, no, I'm not gonna call you mom, I guess, anymore, because it's the wrong thing for me to do.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of like, it really talks about how impressionable we all are as children and how we just kind of carry that trauma into adulthood. And that's something that I really love, because I think we're going to talk about this later, but the power of therapy and trying to kind of have some self-reflection as to what makes us who we are and why.
Yeah. And I mean, just on the therapy front too, like it also is interesting because like she doesn't go to therapy about her relationship with her father or with her relationship with Barb. She goes to therapy because she has an accident while diving and she's trying to get over her fear of doing these specialized dives. But I think it's a good way to introduce how the brain is an ecosystem, how like your internal landscape doesn't exist as a series of like static events. And so in the process of like reviewing this like, one singular instance of having this traumatic accident while diving, she's sort of forced to get into these co-located traumas that are informing how she's reacting in adulthood.
Yeah, exactly right. All right, what was your favorite female relationship?
Well, it's not my favorite, but I think it's the thing that I find most interesting and that I identified with most, which is the relationship with her and Penelope. And I texted you, Magda had already finished this book by the time that I started reading it, because we were sharing a copy. And I was like, I hate Penelope. And I looked at my notes and it was like page 30 was the first time where I was like, I don't like her. She's a pick-me. She's not for me. I just instantly was like, there's something off about this girl. And then as the course of the book goes on, it's tough because Scarlett like loves Penelope.
She like admires her. She looks up to her in a way. No, she really does looks up to her.
Yeah, and you get the impression that like
Yeah.
it's her first, apart from Mariam, who's her roommate who treats her like shit. It's her only real friend.
Exactly. And they don't start out as friends. I think they were just kind of teammates. And then over time, over the course of this book, they become friends. I'm going to call it in quotation marks. Because, you know, certain situations kind of throw them together and they just become a lot closer, where they actually have to start maybe doing synchronized divings and things like that. So they become a lot closer. But you're kind of spot on. It took me way longer than I like to admit that Pen was bad news. At the beginning, I was just like, oh, she's kind of cool. But then you can kind of see as the book progresses that there is this tightrope of handling like a mean girl type of vibes where it's kind of masquerading as a really good friend. It just gave me like Mean Girls like vibe, like the movie, like with Regina George, where she was just kind of making these slight comments on the side that have like a double meaning, that it sounds kind of nice on the surface, but at the bottom of it, it's kind of like, oh, that's kind of mean what you just did there.
Yeah, I mean, I recognize this because I know this girl. I have been the Scarlet in so many relationships before where you're just like, I just want like a friend who like thinks I'm cool and likes me. And Scarlet is, or Pen is cool girl. Pen is, and like what establishes Pen as cool girl is that she's dating the hot main character swimmer, Lukas, who's an Olympic swimmer. And she's sort of bored with him and like casts him off at the very beginning of the book. And then jokingly says like, oh, you and Scarlet should fuck. And you're supposed to be like, oh, she's super edgy. She's super cool. She's so down. She doesn't even care about this. And then she proceeds to, knowing that Scarlet and Lukas do build this relationship together where they're starting to get closer sexually and emotionally. She's still sort of traversing, like putting herself in the middle and trying to like remain emotionally more significant to Lukas. And so I don't know. I clocked that very early on. I just hated her. But do you think that they're not friends? You said friends in quotation. Do you not think they're real friends?
I think through the course of this book, maybe later in the epilogue, it kind of changes. But it just seemed to me that it was just two people that were kind of thrown together, you know, for like for a sports situation, and you just kind of start forming a relationship and you just kind of become situational friends. I think that's kind of what I grabbed from that.
I do not take away that from all. I think they do like deeply care about each other.
I think later they do, but like I think in the beginning I think it was just more of a situational thing and not that they were really good friends. It's like, I don't know. That's kind of how I grabbed that. So yeah, I don't know. I just kind of call it that. Like, I will kind of get into this. I'm a person that holds grudges like nobody's business.
Me too.
I will say that I forgive somebody, but I will never freaking forget it. And so like what she does in this book, which we'll kind of talk about it later.
Let's talk about it now.
Okay, yeah. Like what she does in this, which is like she finds out that, you know, Lukas and Scarlett are in a relationship. Pen she was dating this other guy, which was like a TA or something at her college. And then he breaks up with her and she just goes into a full meltdown because she thought she had like a better boyfriend now because she left Lukas. But now it's like, oh my gosh, did I make a mistake? I need to go back to Lukas now because he still loves me because I'm the one that dumped him, so obviously he's gonna want to get back together with me. And then like she just kind of creates this, I don't know, like I lost my train of thought.
No, but you're right.
Yeah.
She's leaning on Lukas for emotional support the entire duration of that relationship. And it's because they start dating when they're really young.
Yeah.
They start dating when they're like 15 or 16, I think. And then she outgrew him. That's what happened. Like it's like a lot of relationships that move from college to high school is that she's like, no, I want an adult relationship that aligns with my current, my current version of myself.
Yeah. And I think it's kind of like the thing, we grew up as people and we still have this ideal thing in our minds of like what that person used to be when we first met them.
Yeah.
And I think she was still kind of stuck in the person that Lukas was when he was 16. And she thought that she knew him so well. And she thought that she knew exactly what he wanted to do, which that was not the case anymore. Like that's not what was happening. But the way that she was portraying to Scarlett who he was, like Scarlett kept doubting like, oh, maybe I don't really know this guy because like obviously Pen has been dated him for like years and maybe like she just has a better grasp on it. But that wasn't the case. It was just Pen monopolizing the relationships around her and manipulating the situation to kind of make it seem that she was more important than what in reality she was.
Yeah, and this is something that like I don't like about the book, but I think is fascinating writing in its complexity because I don't think the friendship between Pen and Scarlett was situational. I think they have a deep love for each other, like in a platonic way, in the way that like really close girlfriends do. and then they ultimately like stay friends years later. We learn that at the end of the book, spoiler. But where I struggle with that, and I think that's legitimate, I do think like Penelope cares for Scarlett. But where I struggle with the remaining friends is exactly what you're saying, which is like throughout the whole of Scarlett and Lucas's relationship, which Pen is fully aware of, she is implementing like physical touch or like instituting physical touch with him a lot in front of Scarlett. She is not dispelling the idea that she and Lucas have broken up and that Scarlett is like interloping on that breakup. And then we are introduced to this character named Carissa, who's on another kind of diving team. And she says, like, Penelope screwed her over when they were much younger. So for me, that is a personality trait. It's not an instance where, you know, Penelope got in over her head emotionally and made bad decisions and was like destructive for sure, but like redeemable. It's who she is. And so I struggle with that a little bit because I'm like, I don't know. Penelope just sucks. She just does.
I think she was just potentially the type of person that always got what she wanted.
Exactly.
And I don't think she knew how to handle those type of things. There's a situation in here where she got a false negative on a drug testing and her whole world, and I get it, like that's like really devastating. But like there are steps that you can kind of take to do this.
Yeah.
And she just immediately reverted back to like, I'm going to go and be at Lucas's house for like the next week. Well, I'm like, what the heck? Like who does that?
Magda, that's a perfect scene to have chosen. It's why I hate her, because she's a girl who like, one, she's a victim. She cannot handle any sort of discontent in her life on her own. She always needs support from someone else. It's always like Scarlett picking up the pieces or Lucas picking up the pieces. Like she's a victim. She's a narcissist. And so I like this relationship because I read into it and I was like, I do know this girl. I think it's wish fulfillment that they stay friends though.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's why I'm like, I don't really buy into like the friendship aspect of it, because but I mean it comes from somebody that I hold grudges. I do not forgive this type of things, and for me I'm like, hell no, you're out of my life. Like this is exhausting. This is like emotionally exhausting to have to deal with this, and I can't.
Well, and I think at the end there's like even a little line where like Penelope was like referring to Scarlett as her best friends. Like she refers to Lucas as her best friend's fiance. Yeah. And I'm like, not a chance. She would never do that. Nothing about the characterization earlier in the book leads me to believe that she would have this kind of emotional growth.
I agree. And I think to me, that's why I'm like, I don't buy into that story, but I get it. I understand why this was important to their plot. And you just kind of, look, we just had like a 10-minute conversation about this person.
And that's why I'm not mad at it, because like, even though I don't like her and even though I think it's like, you know, it's satisfying that they remain friends. I think it's a testament to like not making the arguments between the female characters as catty. Like they get over it. There's deep things going on there. So yeah, it's not for me, but I appreciate it.
I mean, it was important for the plot. So I think that's kind of what drove a lot of the plot was Pen, honestly. Like she was she almost came across as the main person in this book at times, which is kind of funny. But anyways,
it's a sign of her person that she sucks the air out of the room. Should we move on? She's a pick me cool girl.
All right, let's talk about the most interesting thing now.
You think it's the most interesting? Ooh.
Well, at least for the people that are watching this, I think probably they got into this book potentially for the plot of this.
Let's talk about the sex.
The sex. All right.
Okay, I want to know what your thoughts about this. So Magda and I were talking about this because the thing that bonds these two characters at the beginning is that Scarlett and Lucas are both interested in elements of BDSM. And I was nervous about that because that doesn't, like, I have no judgments on this at all. It's just that in my experience, treatments of this kind of behavior in literature and in movies sucks. And so I was extremely nervous. And you had read 50 Shades, and it was on your book list of books last week that you said you wish you had never read.
Correct. And I think this is I think you summarized that so beautifully, Lindsay. I feel like BDSM has been so demonized by, contemporary literature that I think when we have two consulting adults and they're only doing this in the privacy of their home and like they're enjoying themselves, they have safety words. I think I want to talk about something here shortly about the list of what they like and what they enjoy. That is so important. And I feel like books like 50 Shades of Grey did not give that impression because yes, they do have the safe word and they do have the list, but that expands outside of the bedroom. The level of control that he has over this girl's life, I forget her name.
Doesn't matter. And
Doesn't
that should
matter.
tell you something
Yeah,
that you
that
don't
we're gonna
remember her
have-
name.
So like the level of control that he has over her, it spills over to her work dynamics, how much she has to work out, what she needs to eat, how much she needs to sleep. Like it expands the boundaries of what this particular BDSM thing like extends. At least in my mind. I am not an expert on this, but it does kind of grind my gears, I guess.
Yeah.
That like
In a
books
bad way.
like that, yeah, in a bad way. Like books like that have demonized a community that are trying to be safe and trying to have like a very open relationship. Because if you're gonna get into this type of thing of BDSM, you need to have very open, clear communication with your partners. Trust and confidence in your partner has to be at the front of what you're doing. And like that book was not that. I mean, the 50 Shades of Grey. This one, I think it was really great done because it was just like towards the beginning of the book, they were only doing it a couple of times, and then everybody would move on to their whole thing because they started out only as a physical relationship, and then it just kind of developed into something else. So I really enjoyed the portrayal of it here because it seemed like both of them were in control. They both knew what they wanted. And like one of my favorite scenes, honestly, it was when they both came together and they shared the list of what they were into, what they would say, what would be their safe word, everything. And it just made it seem that this was a consenting relationship between two adults, that they knew what they were getting into it, and they had trust within each other, which I think is really important to make this type of relationship work.
I completely agree. I think, yeah, I mean, you said that so beautifully. I have nothing else to say about it except for that it did really, in my life, make me feel like people should be doing this in their relationships, talking about what they enjoy sexually, what they enjoy for intimacy even, like, is it quality time, but also like on this level too. And I think like it was interesting to see how successful their relationship was because even though you say it was a sexual relationship, and it is, they say that, like they only have sex, I think the reason that they start to work as a couple is because they've already established this really honest line of communication with each other. And so that allows them as people. It's why Scarlett can see Lukas so much better than Penn, because he knows, like, I can just tell you things.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that was something that to me, even very early on their relationship, that level of communication without any words, where they could just kind of look at each other and they know what they're thinking, and they would each take them out of awkward situations. Like I know that Scarlett did it for Lukas when one of the coaches was like harassing him about what he wanted to do with swimming, and he was really uncomfortable, and she just went and like extracted him. And he did the same thing to her when like she's very socially awkward and she doesn't like to deal with too many crowds or people that she doesn't know, and like he kind of took her out of that situation without expressing any type of conversation about this. They knew each other so well, and I think to me that's the deepest level of intimacy, that you can just look at somebody and you know exactly what they're thinking, that you can kind of read their mind. And I think to me that is like a really deep connection that I think everybody should have in there because it's beautiful.
Yeah, I think it's why I react so well to Ali Hazelwood's writing of romance. Like, even though sometimes like the story, like I don't care about diving really. I think it's an interesting element to end to this, but she writes relationships that are based on real things.
Yes.
And something that drives me fucking crazy is that all of her female characters do not know that they're hot. And they like forget really hot people a lot. And I feel like some of that forgetting of other people, which you see in other books, is because her characters undergo a lot of trauma. And I think that does make you forgetful because you're like kind of burying things. So I'm like willing to let that slide. But I want to be like, man, Scarlett, like, you know you're hot. People treat you much better when you're hot. Like, you must know. People are hitting you left and right, and she has no idea. And I think that's like a little bit silly. But what I think that does is really leave space for these connections that feel so much more than I saw him, he was really hot, we had sex and it was hot, and then we fell in love. This is like, no, the way in which we approached each other set the foundation for things that, yes, in sex are nice, but also in relationships work really well.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, I'm clapping.
I'm clapping for you. We're like, we were into this. Apparently, this is like why we talk about these things. Because I'm like, I didn't think about any of these things Magda's saying. Yeah. It's like, there's a lot to do to take apart here.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about that too, where you said like, she has to be super hot. I mean, she's a freaking student athlete that is going to the Olympics, is an NCAA champion. Like, I don't know, like she has to be fucking hot. Like, you know, her body has to be banging. She's young. Like, oh, come on. Like,
people are hitting on her left and right.
All the time.
It's crazy. I see this. I saw this in Not in Love too, where I'm like, girl, girl. Like, come on now.
But I will say this, as somebody when I was in college that I was also really bad at picking up clues of when guys were hitting on me.
And Magda is hot. She is this person. Yeah, no, it's true. They do exist. They do exist.
But like, you haven't had that happen where like somebody's you're just like, I didn't get that vibe. I don't know, like, no, they were.
I mean,
it happens sometimes.
I think where I see that it happens is like, I kind of have this to some extent, although this is like really going to sound like I'm tooting my own horn.
Because Lindsay is very hot too.
No. I think it's like I also grew up like very socially awkward, and I grew up sort of similarly to Scarlett, where I grew up in a very chaotic home, and so you learn to make yourself small so that people don't notice the chaos a little bit, because you like don't want people, like you don't invite people over, and you don't want them, and like I was so focused on that I was never focused on like how I look or whatever, and I was awkward, so like nobody was interested in me for a very long time in my life. And then when I got out of that situation, I got a lot more confident, and I feel like some of that shows in adulthood. And then you're right, you do get in a situation where you're like, I don't know, I wasn't like conditioned to pay attention to any of this. So I do get that. Yeah, exactly. But like her characters are objectively hot. Yeah. So I'm talking about like growing in my confidence. Exactly. These people are like, you look at them and they're a 10, you know?
Exactly. Like she was obviously like Lukas, who is our Swedish, Olympic swimmer, with like apparently is described with like a really hot accent and everything, which honestly, that's like right up my alley.
I did the audiobook and they give him a Swedish accent in the audiobook, and it works.
Oh my God.
It's not like for me, like, I don't know, like sometimes they're like Scottish or whatever, and you're like, I don't know, it's not for me, but like the Swedish works.
I think so too. I was just like, now I need to go do the audiobook.
Who do you think would play Lukas in a movie? I had a really hard time picturing him because he's like not ginger, but like,
I don't know, honestly.
He has freckles, but he's tan. I had a hard time like picturing him.
Yeah, me too. I couldn't really think of it, but maybe we'll post a couple of recommendations in our socials.
That's a total side note.
We should do that.
Curious.
Yeah,
I found myself Googling. I literally Googled hot Swedish swimmer because I was like, give me someone to like start from in reality. And all swimmers are hot. So
they are all hot.
Yeah, I don't know.
I get that.
I didn't find anyone that fit though.
Oh, that's funny.
Ali sent me like a drawing. Someone who can draw sent me a drawing.
Please and thank you.
Okay, anything else on the sexuality front that you want to mention?
I thought it was funny. This is just like a funny comment. When they were kind of get really into it, sometimes she would kind of wake up like the next day with a little bit of bruises, and it just gave me a lot of like Breaking Dawn vibes from Twilight, because that happened after they get married and they have sex. Like Edward hurts Bella a little bit, and like that's why like they kind of like stop initiating for a little bit, because like he freaks out because he's hurting her. But she was just like, I didn't even realize that happened, and that's kind of what Scarlett goes through as well. She's just like, you're just so into the moment that you don't realize that things happened. And I think we've all been there once in a while. Things happen.
I mean, she calls that out like a lot of times. I really liked that too, because it's like it can be hard for our brains when we're so trained to be like, oh, like they're physically hurting her.
Exactly.
But Ali does such a good job of being like, these people have established their own boundaries.
Limits.
And Scarlett says at some point, like, yeah, it might be like internalized misogyny. I don't know. And I don't care, because the reality of it is I feel this way. I have a good relationship, and he treats her like gold outside of their sexual relationship. So like, you're like, yeah, it works. It works for me.
Yeah. You know what this worked to me? Communication. They communicate so well. I love it.
They're so healthy. They're so healthy.
So good for each other. Oh, I love this. All right. Anything else on the sexuality aspect?
No, I think no.
I think it was done really, really well, y'all.
It was done well. I was like not into this, and then I was so red in my face reading in my bed one night. Like I told Magda, like I was like 100 pages in, and I was like, I'm not really sure. And then one scene happens, and I was like, I felt my face get hot, where I was like, I feel, am I breathing normally? Is everything okay? It does.
What was the scene for you? Because for me, it was the library kiss after they read each other's list, and like he just grabs her and throws her against the wall. And I was just like, like my breath caught a little bit.
Mine was when they're in the lab, and he basically just
yes, that was
very directly tells her exactly what she wants to do, which like in any other situation, I'd be like, that's subjugating and I hate it, except for
it was really well done.
It was really well done.
Yeah, totally get it. Okay. Totally get it. Oh God, we're all kind of blushing over here.
Okay.
All right. There are a couple of things that made me kind of laugh out loud. Penn calls the situation, she can be your sandwich, Lukas. And I was like, sandwich? And it's like, oh, a submissive. Like, it took me way longer to get in there. And I'm like, I wonder if that's like a real terminology in that world that I'm just not used to it. So I thought that was really funny. I also find it hilarious that these are like everybody here is super smart. They're all Olympic, level swimmers. They have pre-med courses. Like we're talking about like organic chemistry and like really advanced like biology courses that they're all taking. And they're also doing fascinating like biology research on the side. Like how do they find the time? Oh my gosh. Listen, I was an overachiever in college. I understand that, but like this is like taking it to the next level.
I know.
I'm impressed.
The people are all really impressive, and it's embarrassing. It makes me feel bad about my life.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, man, I'm not doing this right.
The way that Ali's writing is just innately funny. Like it's less situational funny and more like the way that she writes things. And there's a point at which Scarlett and Lukas are at a party, and she's had a couple of drinks, and she's trying to like approach him about why he sent her a message to say like I'm here whenever you want me or something. I can't remember what exactly the email says.
Remind me of the scene. Yeah,
it's the very first email that he sends where he's like, basically like, I'm here whenever you're ready.
Yeah.
And she says, why did you do that on Wednesday? And she says, as far as questions go, this is the Budweiser's more than mine. And it's writing like that where I'm like, Ali's funny. She's just
really
a really funny writer. And it's less like, oh, this like crazy thing happens where like she falls, or like, it's not like that. It's not slapstick. It's just the writing is funny.
Yeah, she's a really, really funny. And that translates in live too, because we've been really lucky to see live Ali live and multiple book events. And she's a really funny person in real life. Like she's hilarious. So it really translates quite well in her stuff too. So what were some of the interesting things that you found in this book? Like anything else that you want to kind of call out?
No, I mean, I think I mentioned this earlier. It's just the silly thing about like, one, her characters never remember people. It happens in a lot of her books. It happened in Two Can Play Too, where I'm like, you remember people that are hot, right? But then I'm like thinking, oh, that might be a trauma reaction, right? Where you like just don't.
You're like, obviously they're not going to know who they are, so why do I even care? And I just kind of focus on your own world.
Yes.
I think that's kind of where that's coming from.
The other thing that I really like that Ali does is she pays really close attention to details that are like seemingly extraneous that would really bother me. So like to your question about time, how do they have time to do this? She like goes into detail about their schedule.
Yes, and I love that.
At one point there's like the grand gesture where Scarlett goes to Sweden to go visit Lukas. And she's supposed to be in an internship. And so she talks about like why she's allowed to leave her internship. Oh, she was ahead of time on her work. And so her internship didn't care. In movies and stuff, like shit like that, where they like leave things dangling, it makes me freaking crazy. And I really appreciate that Ali's like, don't worry about that. It's okay. Her life can go on. She can afford to do this for the fall. You know how Scarlett gets the money to go get the ticket.
Exactly.
You know how she's able to leave her job. I'm like, it's those little things that like irk me in rom-coms that Ali's like, I got you, girl. I'll cover that.
The logistical aspect of coordinating somebody's life in here, it's perfection. I love that so much. And like, there were times where like Lukas and Scarlett, like they go a month without seeing each other, and they're just kind of texting here and there because they both, again, it goes back to communication. They both understand what their lives are like. And we even get to see this in the epilogue when they're both finishing up med school and they're doing their residency. Like they talk about it in a funny way. Like, when am I going to ever see you again?
Yeah.
Because they understand the levels of schedules that they have, and like it's gonna get better over time, but it's just that level of like clear, open understanding on who they are and what they're trying to achieve. It was just so beautifully done.
So beautiful.
Something that I thought was funny, and I don't know if you caught this, and I always find this kind of weird, and there's been a couple of like news posts that I've seen on this, is that there was these two divers that were identical twins, and they were also dating another set of identical twins. I always find that pretty fascinating when you have two sets of identical twins dating each other, because when they have kids, like they'll be technically like siblings.
Yeah.
Which is so funny. And I just thought that I was kind of like a funny little notch. It's not that important to the story, but it just kind of made me cackle a little bit when I was reading that.
I thought it was funny too.
Yeah.
And then one sets of twin break up and not the other.
That's kind of interesting. Then you're gonna start to see this guy's face forever if they do end up getting married. Like, there needs to be a book written about this, because I find that quite hilarious. But I don't know, there has to be a lot of therapy things that need to be discussed.
1000%.
And speaking of therapy, I really, really loved how much this was discussed here, not just from Scarlett's side, but also Lukas has talked about like him visiting therapy, because they both have had very traumatic experiences. Like Lukas lost his mom pretty early on. Obviously Scarlett had a diving accident, but we also know that she had like an abusive relationship with the dad earlier too. So I really appreciated that they kind of took the time of saying like they went to therapy, but it wasn't like, oh, I went to therapy and now I'm fixed. It's like a work in progress type of situation where they're just kind of like, you know, moving the layers and kind of getting better towards each other. And I really love that because it was a consistent theme throughout the book.
Yeah, and I do like that the therapy conversation removes the idea that they're into BDSM because they've had trauma. Like
Exactly.
they're into BDSM and they've had trauma. Like it has nothing to do with the other. And I appreciated that.
I know, me too. Yeah. All right, any final thoughts?
This isn't a prime example of when I'm talking to you about something that I'm like, oh, my love for this has grown.
Exactly. That's why like book clubs are amazing, or just talking to somebody, because like I thought this book was like, it was good, but now that we kind of talked about like some of these relationships and everything that we enjoyed, like it's just kind of like skyrockets.
There are layers.
Yeah, I love that so much. So yeah, another gem by Ali Hazelwood. I really, really enjoyed this book. It was fun. You know, just beware. There's trigger warnings on this book, but if you're okay with it, it is a really fun read and you're really going to enjoy it.
And it's not dramatic, really. Like there are trigger warnings in that it's mentioned, but I would not say that there was any part of it that I was like at all scandalized by in any way.
Yeah, it's a really great story. So thanks, Ali Hazelwood, for doing this. All right, well, thank you for listening to Literally Books, the podcast.
Where we say what we read.
And we mean what we say. Bye.